she invited us to her Victoria's birthday party that next day at 2 o'clock. And she asked if I had kids, and I said, yeah, I have some kids. And she's like, well, bring them, more the merrier. Victoria will love to have kids around.
But that birthday party never happened. Victoria was murdered the morning she was supposed to have the party.
Welcome back. I'm Cassie, and this is A Wicked World. I've been hearing recently that YouTube has been unsubscribing people from the channel. So if you previously subscribed, make sure you double check to see if you are still subscribed. And if you haven't subscribed yet, then what are you waiting for? Do that now. So the story I have for you today is said to be one of the most horrific in New Mexico's history. And if you've heard this one before, you still may be surprised. And if you've heard of this case before, you may still be surprised by what you hear today. Because after I did some serious deep digging on this case, I myself feel a little bit different about it. This is the story of Victoria Martens. Victoria Ann Martens was born on August 23, 2006, to her mother, Michelle Martens. Her father's name was Kyle Martinez, but he was never in Victoria's life. And Victoria also had a younger brother who was named Matthew. Michelle had given birth to Victoria at the Presbyterian Hospital in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And the mother said that despite her never getting any prenatal care during her pregnancy with her daughter, Victoria was still born perfectly healthy. Victoria, who was also called Queen by her friends and family, loved life and other people. The 10-year-old attended Petroglyph Elementary School, where she met and made numerous friends. Making friends was an easy thing for Victoria to do, as she was always so friendly to others. She also had an amazing laugh and a cute smirk. Victoria loved to ride her bike, go rollerblading, and, on occasion, she would go four-wheeling with her Nana and Grandpa. She additionally loved to swim, and gymnastics was her passion. Victoria's mother had a low IQ, around 90, but she was still said to take good care of her son, Matthew, and her daughter, Victoria. When Victoria was about a year old, her mother began dating a man named Jason Oding. They moved in together and had their son, Matthew, at the time that Victoria was 2 years old. Eventually, the two split up, and Michelle took her two children and moved to an apartment of her own in 2014. Jason would still continue to financially support as well as have visits with his son, Matthew, and he would say that Michelle always seemed to be a responsible parent. Then, in March of 2016, Michelle would contact Child Protective Services after her current boyfriend, David Hernandez, tried to kiss and then put his hands down Victoria's pants. David had a history of sexually abusing children, including several in his own family. He had also been arrested for attempting to kidnap a 4-year-old girl in 2013. However, he had never been charged for the sexual assaults, and while he was arrested for the attempted kidnapping, the charges would end up being dropped. Michelle had immediately broken things off with David when she found out that he was doing these things to Victoria, and she kicked him out of the apartment, claiming that she had not known his history up until then. Following this incident, Child Protective Services would refer Michelle to the Albuquerque Police Department, but when she spoke with them, they told her there was nothing they could do because trying to kiss a child was not illegal. Victoria's mother, Michelle, would end up contacting Child Services a total of 5 times between March of 2016 and July of 2016, though it's unknown exactly why she had contacted them, as no action arose from these reports. Also, sometime in mid-2016, Michelle would start a new job at Smith's Food and Drug, where she was said to be a good worker, and she went in for every scheduled shift. In order for her to obtain this job, she had to pass a drug test as well, and she did that with no problems. Now, in July of 2016, Victoria's mother, Michelle, would meet her new boyfriend. He was named Fabian Gonzalez. She met him on the dating site Plenty of Fish. He had moved in with Michelle, Victoria, and Victoria's little brother, Matthew, and would often watch the children while Michelle went to work. But Fabian had told Michelle to keep their relationship a secret from her parents. which was likely because he wanted to hide his criminal background. Michelle did not know about Fabian's prior criminal history, which included driving while intoxicated, resisting arrest, and child abuse. However, the child abuse charge had not resulted from him actually hurting a child, but rather it was the result of Fabian and an ex-girlfriend getting into a fight while Fabian was driving his car and the child was in the back seat. Then on August 15, 2016, Fabian's cousin Jessica Kelly was released from prison. And just days later, on August 17th, he would reach out to her and invite her to stay with them at Michelle's apartment. But Jessica was not the kind of person that you would want around children. Not only was she a known methamphetamine user, but she also had a long criminal history, which included trafficking controlled substances, assault on a family member, and conspiracy to commit criminal penetration. While Jessica had been locked up serving time on her other charges, she had acted as a lookout while another inmate raped a woman in September of 2012. So this wonderful woman, Jessica Kelly, began staying with Michelle, Fabian, and the 2 children, sleeping on the couch in the 3-bedroom apartment. On the afternoon of Victoria's 10th birthday, August 23, 2016, prior to her arriving home on the school bus, her mother Michelle and Fabian decided to take off around 2:30 to go pick up some drinks and marijuana. They also stopped by the home of one of Fabian's relatives during this time, and this relative would warn Fabian and Michelle that they should not have Jessica staying at the apartment because she was acting rather weird. Jessica had given the relative her EBT card to use, but refused to give the PIN number because the devil told her not to. During the time that they were gone, Michelle would text her own mother and ask her if she could pick up Victoria from the bus stop. However, since she didn't hear from her mother back in a timely manner, Fabian was able to convince Michelle to let Jessica pick up Victoria from the bus stop, saying that they could trust her and Victoria would be safe with her. Michelle agreed, though Jessica wouldn't end up showing up at the bus stop to get Victoria. And the little girl ended up walking to a neighbor's apartment instead. This neighbor then contacted Michelle to let her know that Victoria was looking for her. The mother, along with her boyfriend Fabian, would end up arriving back at the apartment around 5 p.m. Around 6, Fabian would take Victoria to the gas station and buy her a soda. At the same time, Jessica, who was still back at the apartment, was speaking on the phone with her sister, and she would tell her sister that she was tweaking out and hallucinating due to a long bender of using meth. Once Victoria and Fabian arrived back from the gas station, Michelle and Fabian would take off again, leaving Victoria alone with Jessica. The couple would arrive back at the apartment again less than an hour later, but this time Michelle did not check on her daughter. They then left again only minutes later, and shortly after that, 2 neighbors would remember having a conversation with Jessica and Victoria. During which time, Jessica would tell them that she had given Victoria money, then quickly pull the little girl back inside. What happened after that is up for debate. But Victoria Martens was supposed to be celebrating her 10th birthday the next day at a party that her mom had organized at the apartment for family and friends. Unfortunately, before that could happen, in the early morning hours of August 24th, around 4 a.m., police were being called to the apartment where the little girl lived with her mother, after it was reported that Jessica had attacked Fabian and Michelle. A neighbor had actually been the one to contact police after Fabian had ran down and began knocking on the door and told them to contact 911 because his girlfriend was being attacked. Shortly after he had knocked, Michelle also appeared at the neighbor's door, and she had a bloody gash on her forehead, as well as blood on her face, chest, and arms, and she said, "She killed my daughter." According to the neighbor, Michelle was in shock, but didn't really appear to have much emotion on her face. She was there, but not really. When authorities arrived at the apartment, Jessica Kelly was the one to come and answer the door, since Fabian and Michelle had already fled after she attacked them. As soon as Jessica realized that it was the authorities, she shut the door in their face, so they had to force their way into the property. When they did, they found a horrific scene. A fire had been set in the bathroom of the apartment. Right before Jessica had tried to make an escape and she jumped off the balcony, she set fire to something that was inside the bathtub. When the fire was put out, it was discovered that the fire had actually been set to the body of 10-year-old Victoria. She was wrapped up in a blanket and had also been partially dismembered, with some of her organs being found in a trash bag inside of a laundry hamper in the apartment's living room. The police quickly arrested all 3 adults on the scene: Michelle, Fabian, and Jessica. Victoria's younger brother, Matthew, who also normally lived at the apartment, was luckily with his father that night. Now, Jessica, who had tried to jump off the balcony in an attempt to flee from police, had broken her ankle in the process. Michelle and Fabian both had facial injuries at the time of their booking, due to being attacked by Jessica with an iron.
Come here. Come here.
I didn't do nothing.
Come here.
That's Jessica Kelly speaking to police in August 2016.
There's some that went down. No, I didn't do nothing. Hey, stop.
In the video, police confront Kelly, who is limping after jumping off a balcony.
Why'd you lock the door?
Somebody just started fighting and went over the balcony, dude.
What were you fighting about?
She woke up and asked where her daughter was. I don't know where she's at, dude.
Okay. No, we got her. She's in another apartment. Did you hit her? Did you hit her? Did you hit somebody?
She hit me and I hit her back. As one officer talks to Kelly to get her side of the story, a couple of other officers go into the apartment, not knowing what they'll find. When they finally come out, their demeanor is changed. They seem upset.
Put her in your car, man. You're gonna walk.
Broken. I just got thrown off the balcony.
You didn't get thrown off. You jumped off. I saw you close the door.
The officers then get a call from dispatch.
Can you advise what we're looking at here? Male, female, close breathing?
Walk.
No.
Female 10.
No. Before they reach the officer's car, Kelly tells them there was another person with her in the apartment.
Who else was in the apartment with you?
Another guy.
Where's the other guy?
He took off. He started trying to wipe blood up. And I started panicking.
Who's the other guy?
I don't know his name. They call him Makote.
It would be determined that Victoria had died as a result of manual strangulation. The medical examiner also found that there were stab wounds to her body as well as minor trauma to her rectum. Victoria's blood alcohol content was also found to be a 0.02. However, this was said to be from decomposition, and she actually didn't have any substances in her body at the time she died. The medical examiner also discovered that Victoria had HPV. Michelle Martens, Fabian Gonzalez, and Jessica Kelly were all indicted on multiple charges, including intentional abuse of a child, aggravated criminal sexual penetration, murder, and tampering with evidence. Following Jessica Kelly's arrest, she had been brought to a hospital due to her broken ankle. While she was there, she refused to give any DNA sample to police, but they ended up obtaining a warrant and forcing her to do so. Jessica also requested a lawyer at this time and refused to tell police anything other than there were 3 other people in the apartment that night and they should be looking for Victoria's real killer. When Fabian Gonzalez was interviewed, he denied having any involvement in Victoria's murder. He told police that he and Michelle had left Victoria alone with Jessica that evening. That night was actually supposed to be the last night that Jessica was even staying in the apartment, because Fabian had informed her that she needed to move out the next day due to her acting very strange. When they had gotten home that night, Victoria had been sleeping, and they didn't want to wake her, so they went off to bed themselves. Fabian said that he and Michelle were then awoken hours later by Jessica attacking them.
She woke you up. Let me clarify, okay? What time did you guys go to bed?
We was there let's get call 40.
This morning?
Yes. We were like, wondering what she was going to get here. So kind of she makes this good call. So I wanted her to go there, and her walking up the house. You know, I still had to get that trust in her, you know what I mean? This was like kind of iffy, you know, flip on or whatever, and I was getting encouraged, but I'm very sure it was like, we kind of enjoyed that. And then I think we got woken up around 1:32.
How do you know that what you do in 1:32? Did you look at a clock or did you look at a phone? How do you know?
How I know is because I asked her, she said,
You guys do.
she said, got a phone. Well, what do you? I got a phone, just had this, so I'm using the key here. And that's what she said, it's nice. And so that's what it was. Right after she said that, we were like still kind of waking up, so I could go fast, right? We were still kind of waking up. She woke up and said that, she got a phone. Like I said, I asked her what's going on, you know, she said, something too. And then she goes, hey, should do that, you can sit here. Well, yeah, time to get I took a time to go. She said that one. 40, you know, it's too long. Yeah. I didn't know exactly. They were tough.
Yeah, and then shortly after that, you said that she stopped.
Yeah, right away after that, what you guys do, you take her away. And she said, first and fourth, that I'm off with. And she said, of course I use for that. You're very deep.
So she said, what did it?
Yeah. Good. Hey. I got scared. I was trying to fight off, and where the call you I was trying to do that again. I didn't know if there was even a hospital to call her. I was worried about Victoria.
Where was Victoria?
She told me to get a room. And I was wondering why she wouldn't come down. She comes up, hey, put it down, what the heck? Come here, put it in. You know, okay. And I came out, and got feeling like, they don't really get away with it, but she wanted to help check out baby and get her off her shoe, you know. And I figured out that she really went at it, baby, not psychopathic.
Psychopathic?
Cage curse or something like that. I never seen something like that.
The first time you ever seen her act that way?
Yes.
Okay. Alright. So then, you fight her, you take the iron away, correct?
Yeah, and I was like, get under, go, try to go. I guess she was still trying to speak out, she was trying to come with her. And when you get the fight, I pull it up, she said, no. And I do it, I do it. How can you get this out? And
I don't care, you guys can
yeah. And I'm like, what's the other stuff about good shit? You know, how angry, you guys don't even get it. And like, when I did that, she kind of went to go find Sean. I got back to the house. So I was like, where you go? She called her again. I started like, fucking, like, she's doing everything on the house. And I was like, well, that's right. So I'm going back to the house. I know, go to the house. I'll go down. She was trying to get in the front door lock to get money. And she's like, okay, look, I didn't know if they were getting out the house or they were going outside. I didn't know. Okay. We were scared. So I woke up to that.
Okay, so when you drunk, you run. Right, and you go to that neighbor's. When you guys got to that apartment, there's a pair of white socks.
Yeah, there's that one. Yeah.
Was it both yours?
Yeah,
Tell me about those.
there's the white one.
So Michelle's the white ones, yours are
The black one.
the black ones?
Yeah, and because like he was still soaking wet, you know.
Okay.
Put one in the grass and skin, you know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. You need to use that, you guys. You want to show me?
Yeah, I did.
All right. So did Michelle tell you anything about her encounter with Jessica?
She was lying on top of the computer. I don't know how to. Let's get you. I don't know. I don't know. I was
When it was time for detectives to speak with Victoria's mother, Michelle, her story was similar to Fabian's. They had left her daughter, Victoria, alone with Jessica. When they got back home, they didn't check on her because she was sleeping. Only hours after that were they awoken by Jessica attacking them, and it's then that Michelle found out that Victoria was dead. Michelle told authorities that when Victoria had been left alone with Jessica, she had accidentally ingested some meth, and this had killed her. But police weren't buying her story and told her that Fabian was confessing to everything, though he wasn't. So after hours of questioning, Michelle would finally break and admit to horrific crimes. She told police that she knew her boyfriend Fabian and his cousin Jessica had been S.A.ing her daughter Victoria. At least 3 times, she said, leading up to her death. The mother then admitted to police that she had seen Fabian and Jessica give her daughter meth. They had then S.A.'d her and murdered her. She claimed she watched while this happened. Michelle also admitted to police that in the past, she had had men over to have sex with Victoria for her own gratification.
We had hot dogs, hamburgers, the kids played together, went to the pool. We spent the entire day till nightfall with Michelle.
July 4th, John and Pat Martens and their friend Laura Bob say life couldn't have been more normal. Just 6 weeks later, their granddaughter, Victoria Martens, would be murdered. The Martens say all the way up to the hours before her death, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Victoria had just celebrated her 10th birthday at school.
I spoke to her Tuesday afternoon. I said, how was your party?
5 o'clock, we talked to her.
She says, oh, it was good. Did they sing happy birthday to you at school? Yes. I said, how were the cupcakes? She says, oh, they were good.
Wednesday, August 24th.
I got a call from the hospital that Michelle was in there, a domestic
They called
dispute.
us. I said, domestic dispute? I'm like, she's not with nobody. What are you talking about, domestic dispute?
Thinking of the whole incident. Thinking of the pain that Victoria must have went through. And to what point. And thinking of my daughter sitting in there. What is she doing in there? You know? How'd she get herself into this?
So how did, as they describe her, a single, hardworking mom who had never been arrested and loved her kids more than anything, allegedly do this to her own child?
Did you suspect any drug use by Michelle at all?
None.
Our daughter never did drugs. She never drank.
The Martens say Michelle had just passed a drug test 3 months earlier to land a job at Smith's.
Went to the job every day.
They say Michelle was responsible and active in Victoria and her 8-year-old brother's lives.
If there was something going on, she masked it so well, and she built such a prolific, persona with us. We never saw this. Michelle didn't change until these people inducted themselves into her life. That's when she changed. What kind of power they had over her, I don't know.
Did Victoria or Matthew, did they ever mention this guy, or?
No.
They never said anything about meeting him?
Neither one of them.
The Martens, who retired here to help with the grandkids, say both kids were always happy. They believe maybe the kids stayed silent because of the love for their mother.
That's probably why she never said nothing.
Yeah.
She didn't want to get him in trouble.
John has gone to visit Michelle twice in jail. She can't talk about the case, but he's asked one thing.
Why? Why bring these people into your house?
What does she say?
Well, she told me, she says, I was trying to help them out to get on their feet.
The Martens say it's difficult standing by their daughter.
We didn't know our daughter to be anybody that would do something like this. And if there's evidence and she's found guilty, then she deserves to be punished.
Punished just like the other two.
And regardless the outcome, they say they'll always love their daughter.
But I know Victoria's somewhere in heaven now saying, forgive my mom.
That's exactly what she's saying.
Forgive my mom.
Multiple things with her story, however, that didn't make sense. One being that she said that Victoria had ingested meth, but none was found in her system at the time of the autopsy. Police had also found no evidence of drugs or drug paraphernalia at the scene. Then years after Victoria's murder, a psychological profile would show that Michelle Martens had personality traits that made her susceptible to false confessions. An outside medical expert would claim that Michelle did not function at the same level that most people do, and she was always trying to please people and give them the answers that they wanted. So it's believed that detectives had sold Michelle on what they believed happened to Victoria and coerced her into making false confessions in the case. Looking at Michelle's confession, many of her statements were contradictory, and to many of the things that she was asked, she would just say, mm-hmm, or uh-huh, because she was just agreeing with information and not coming up with all of it on her own. The other reason why Michelle's confessions were not to be completely believed was because it was discovered that neither she nor Fabian had actually been home at the time that her daughter had been murdered. Cell phone records placed the couple outside of the home during the time that police believed Victoria had been murdered, sometime between 7 and 8:45 p.m. Due to this new evidence, the murder charges against Michelle were dropped. The rape and murder charges against Fabian were also dropped, and he was instead given charges of child abuse and tampering with evidence, as authorities believed that he had helped his cousin Jessica clean up the crime scene and partially dismember Victoria's body. Then, in January of 2019, the rape charges against Jessica were dropped after it was discovered that there was not enough evidence that Victoria had even been raped that night. It was very likely that the tearing they had found on her anus could have been caused from something like constipation. Also in January, a plea deal would be reached for Jessica Kelly, and she pleaded no contest to child abuse resulting in death. The murder charges against her were dropped, and she was sentenced to 50 years in prison with 6 suspended. As part of her plea deal, Jessica agreed to testify against Fabian. So the state of New Mexico decided to give her a plea deal, the only one who was still charged with murder, so she could testify against Fabian, who was only accused of helping her clean up the crime scene after. Makes sense. The thing is, other than her testimony, there was no evidence that Fabian had helped to clean up the crime scene. Victoria's mother, Michelle, would also accept a plea deal, and she was sentenced to 12 years behind bars. As part of her plea deal, she was also required to testify against Fabian. Fabian's trial would not begin until July of 2022, and he had actually been out on bond since the end of 2019 after prosecutors failed to prove that he was a danger to the community. When the trial began, it was the prosecution's view that an unknown man who had been seeking gang retaliation against Fabian was actually the one who had killed Victoria. They based this theory on statements from Jessica as well as new DNA evidence that had been found. New DNA belonging to an unknown male had been found on Victoria's body, primarily on her back. And while they were not able to identify who this DNA belonged to, they were able to rule out every male in Victoria's life, including Fabian, and officers who had worked on the case. However, this DNA could easily have come from someone that Victoria was playing with at school that day. Now, Jessica, who previously would not tell police anything, had been given a plea deal, so she had a new story to tell. She admitted to being high on meth the entire day before Victoria had been killed, and was very paranoid. Jessica also admitted on the stand that following her release from prison, she'd been sleeping on Michelle's couch, and she had been constantly on the lookout for drugs, as well as men to sleep with. She said that she would bring these strange men over to Michelle's apartment during the day and have sex with them on her couch. According to Jessica, when Victoria had come home from school on August 23rd, during the time that Fabian and Michelle were out of the apartment, Jessica had become very paranoid and thought someone was going to roll up as she saw a car with 2 people in it repeatedly driving by. She said that sometime after Michelle and Fabian had left, a man entered the apartment and said he was looking for Fabian. The man then, without any warning, had gone into Victoria's room, SA'd her, and killed her.
Some guy just shows up. I left the door open, so he kind of walks in. He asked, where's Fable? And I told him he wasn't here.
Kelly testified she thought that man might be Victoria's dad, and that he then walked into Victoria's room.
I ended up grabbing a cigarette and going to the balcony and smoking a cigarette, not thinking anything was going to happen. And when he came out, he let me know that we had something to clean up in there.
Around sunset on August 23, 2016, Kelly testified she checked Victoria's pulse and found none, adding she'd told Gonzalez what had happened once he and Michelle returned home later that evening.
Because he was like, for real, cuz, what the f? And I was like, for real, like, what are we gonna do? We have to get rid of her body, like, no. And he said, all right, we'll take turns.
So you fabricated the story about the other guy wiping blood off. Is that right? That didn't happen.
That did not happen.
But if this man never came into the apartment, the truth would be 200 years, not 44, correct?
No, because it would have never happened if that man would have never entered the apartment. We wouldn't be here today.
Once this man had left and Fabian had arrived back home, according to Jessica, she told Fabian that Victoria was dead, and they needed to conceal the homicide. But they didn't tell Michelle. Instead, Fabian had instructed her to cook dinner, then put her to bed. While Michelle was asleep, Jessica claimed that she and Fabian had dismembered Victoria's body. But Jessica also would admit on the stand that she had tried to kill Michelle and Fabian in the middle of the night when she had hit Michelle with an iron. So why she didn't get charged with attempted murder right then and there, I'm not sure. It also shows that she's very clearly capable of killing somebody. But it was the prosecution's theory that this unknown man had killed Victoria, and Jessica and Fabian had just helped to clean up the crime. There was an incident that had happened days before Victoria's murder on August 21st that they attempted to use as proof. That day, Jessica's family and friends had held a barbecue for her to celebrate her release from prison, and Fabian, who was not invited, had attended anyways. During the party, Fabian was asked to leave by a woman who claimed that he had stolen from her in the past. But he refused to go and ended up getting into a fight with two people in which he obtained a black eye. Following the fight, Fabian had driven to his brother's home, then called up this woman and threatened to bring his brothers back to the party with him. They are said to be founding members of the TCK gang that Fabian was also a part of. Later that same day, Fabian would get into another argument with this woman via text message, and he would go online and search for guns as well. Also, on the same night that Victoria had been killed, around 10:25 p.m., Fabian sent 2 text messages to the woman whom he'd gotten into a fight with, and they said, "Answer me and get over here now, or I will go looking for you." The thing is, there was zero physical evidence that Fabian had actually helped Jessica clean up the crime scene. None of Victoria's DNA had been found on Fabian, and vice versa. Additionally, Fabian's fingerprints were not found on the knife block or any of the knives, though Jessica's were. His fingerprints were also not found on the laundry basket that contained Victoria's remains or the plastic bag. Police would only find his fingerprints on a mop in the home and 2 CDs. Prosecutors also attempted to highlight Fabian's shifting story and lack of detail in his interviews with police. They noted a missing gap of time in Fabian's timeline of events from the early morning hours of August 24th. This was because he said that the attack on him and Michelle had taken place around 2 o'clock in the morning. But to be fair, he had asked Jessica what time it was because she had taken his and Michelle's phone, and she was the one who replied back telling him it was 2 a.m. He didn't actually confirm this himself. Also, to try to prove their case against Fabian, the prosecution was clinging to the fact that a sock belonging to Fabian had been found to contain Victoria's remains. This sock, however, had been found inside a hamper, the same hamper that Victoria's remains had been found inside of. So you do the math. Multiple witnesses would testify during Fabian's trial, and they would say that at 8:45 p.m. on August 23rd, they had seen Jessica walking down the apartment stairs carrying Victoria's body wrapped in a blanket. The little girl looked like she could have just been asleep, though it was later discovered that she was indeed dead at this time. As Jessica had walked down the stairs, she spotted Fabian and Michelle, who were still in Michelle's car after they had just returned back home, and they were listening to very loud music. According to Jessica, they were both paranoid and tweaking out at the time. She said that Michelle was using meth. However, it's said that Michelle was just high from marijuana and had actually never used any other drugs in her life. She had also just recently passed a drug test to get her new job at the grocery store, so that's up for debate. Jessica got about 6 feet away from the car before she quickly spun her body back around and then yelled over her shoulder to Fabian and Michelle, asking if they were ready to go upstairs to the apartment. Fabian had yelled back, "No, not yet." And Jessica then went back up the stairs carrying Victoria still. Fabian and Michelle would follow a few minutes later. If multiple witnesses saw Jessica carrying Victoria in a blanket and they thought that she was just sleeping, then chances are Fabian and Michelle, who were high at the time and listening to very loud music, not paying attention, probably thought the same. Authorities had also discovered a letter from Victoria written to Fabian that had a red heart cut out on the front, and it read, "I like you because you are funny. I really like you. We were supposed to go to the zoo today, and I just like you." When it was Michelle's turn to testify, she would say that Fabian had not gotten out of bed at all that night, and she never implicated him in any wrongdoing. The only person that did implicate him was Jessica, the same one who also admitted to being extremely delusional and paranoid, and admitted to trying to kill Fabian and Michelle. Throughout the entire ordeal, Fabian Gonzalez had refused to take a plea deal. Because as he said, "I am innocent and I would never plead guilty to something I didn't do." However, in the end, he was found guilty of child abuse and tampering with evidence and was sentenced to 37.5 years in prison. Also following Victoria's murder, her maternal grandparents filed a wrongful death lawsuit, claiming that the report of Michelle's ex-boyfriend trying to kiss Victoria had never been properly investigated. A law enforcement official had also lied and said that these claims had been investigated following Victoria's death. However, in February of 2021, the lawsuit was dismissed.
The mom had told us that there was nothing that was going on in the home, that she removed the boyfriend.
That's the voice of Officer Fred Duran back in January. He was a spokesperson for APD and was responding to a reporter at the Albuquerque Journal who was trying to confirm if officers investigated claims that a man tried to kiss Victoria Martens 5 months before she was killed.
And when the detectives spoke to the kids, they didn't make any allegations that anything had happened.
The problem is detectives never spoke to the kids.
The investigation showed that absolutely Officer D did lie, set up and lie about the involvement of APD.
The Civilian Police Oversight Agency launched an investigation months ago. Members of the board met earlier this week to discuss the findings of that investigation.
The investigation found that it was a supervisor from the Crimes Against Children unit who told APD that the information they gave the Journal was wrong.
The CPOA says a different APD spokesperson, Selena Espinosa, was told about the mistake but never did anything to correct it. In a statement today, Espinosa admitted the miscommunication and says APD takes these issues very seriously. The Oversight Board is now recommending both spokespersons be disciplined.
After they filed this lawsuit, the grandparents of Victoria Martens were harassed on a daily basis, with many people thinking that they had known about Michelle trafficking her daughter, and that was how she had gotten an STD. The thing is, no one in Victoria's life had noticed any signs of her being SA'd. Michelle had also called child services on her own after she found out that David had attempted to kiss Victoria, and she immediately kicked him out of her house. She even called the police over it, and then continued to call child services multiple times after. I just can't see a mother showing that level of concern and then just weeks later selling her daughter to random men. It doesn't make sense. As for the STD that they found out Victoria had, as I had said, it was HPV. And while it could have been from her being SA'd, it also can be passed from a mother to a child during birth if Michelle had it. Or the ex-boyfriend, David Hernandez, could have easily given her that STD just from the kissing. So while Michelle should have known better and never left Victoria in Jessica's care that night, and Fabian should have known as well, even though Victoria was not his daughter, in the end, I think Jessica is the only one who is responsible for killing and dismembering this little girl. As the news spread about Victoria's death, neighbors and friends had built a makeshift memorial under a tree near the apartment complex where she lived. adorning it with stuffed animals and candles. And in the evening, dozens of people would gather for a candlelight vigil to honor Victoria. Another shrine for her was erected at Petroglyph Elementary School, where Victoria had just started the new school year. School officials said in a statement that, like the rest of the community, their hearts ache. Victoria is in our thoughts and prayers as we hold our children just a little tighter on this sad day. A memorial service would be held for Victoria Martens on Saturday, October 29, 2016, at Cooper Point Church in Albuquerque. Well, thank you for listening to Victoria's story today. As I said, her mother Michelle should absolutely have known better than to leave her daughter in the care of someone who was using meth and seeing things. And Fabian should never have tried to convince her that it was okay to leave Victoria in Jessica's care. So while they both still deserved punishment in this case, I don't know if they actually knew that Victoria was dead until Jessica attacked them around 4 in the morning. Jessica was the one who had a long, violent criminal history. Jessica was the one who was tweaking out that night. Jessica was the one who tried to kill Fabian and Michelle. She also knew that she was getting kicked out of the apartment the very next day. And I think that she just lost her mind while Fabian and Michelle were gone and she attacked Victoria. But either way, what happened to Victoria that night was horrific and tragic and should never have happened. What do you think about this case? So if you like true crime and you want to hear it from me, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button below and turn on your notifications too, so you'll know when I upload a new video, which is at least twice every week. Thanks for watching A Wicked World today. Until next time, take care guys. Bye. Thank you to all the patrons of A Wicked World. Now, there's even more of A Wicked World on Patreon. So check it out at patreon.com/awickedworld or use the Patreon app. You'll have access to exclusive videos each month and more. Any support truly helps to make sure the victims never get forgotten and to highlight the shortcomings of society associated with each case. Do you have a suggestion for a case you'd like to see me cover? If so, send me an email at awickedworldtruecrime@gmail.com.